back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. Let's talk about the breaking news. Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith clarifies application of Fiducia Supplicans. It responds to all sorts of objections that have been made, ranging from people who claim, hey, these Episcopal conferences and these bishops are opposed to the document, or this new teaching blesses sin, or it compromises on the church's teaching on homosexuality and marriage and things like that. And so it addresses everything. It is a very, very helpful clarification that I hope will go a long way in helping people who are genuinely just confused and are trying to understand the church's position. I hope this will go a long way in assisting them in understanding what the church teaches and what it is saying and what it's not saying. So we're going to take a look at that by reading the 5-page document from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, as well as we're going to take a look at some news that dropped last night where Cardinal Fernandez, again, the head of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, gave an interview. And in this interview, he goes hard against the Germans, and he puts them in their place. And he indicates that he is going to be addressing some additional problems with the German bishops pretty soon, as he's going to be flying over there to have discussions with them. And of course, they're going to be coming to Rome 3 times this year to be reminded on what they can and can't do, what they can and can't teach, and so on. So we'll take a look at that as well after analyzing and reading this new document. But hey, I want to remind y'all, hit that subscribe button. If you're not subscribed to Reason and Theology, you should be. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You'll be able to see anytime I go live. You'll be notified, as well as you'll be supporting what I'm doing here with Reason and Theology so that I can reach new people. The more people hit the like button, comment, subscribe, the more YouTube will reach new people who just haven't heard of Reason and Theology. So if you appreciate the content here, please help me do that. Help me reach additional people who have not heard some of the other things that should be considered, especially with this discussion on the document Fiducia Supplicans. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see now the Vatican News website here that has the article. I'll try to zoom in just a little bit more here. Okay. Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith clarifies application of Fiducia Supplicans. So another clarification. In a statement signed by the Cardinal Prefect and the Secretary, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith clarifies that Fiducia Supplicans does not change the doctrine on marriage. And I'll just point out here, people say, well, hey, why do you have to clarify this if it was already clear? See, that's the problem. The document was clear, but a lot of people created confusion and made accusations about the document that are not true, and it caused a massive controversy. And not just people in the secular world and secular news, but also Catholics, unfortunately. And because of that, clarification is needed. So Fiducia Supplicans does not change the doctrine of marriage. Bishops are able to discern the application of the document according to context, and that pastoral blessings are not comparable to liturgical or ritualized blessings. Now, so here is the full thing. January 4th, 2024, we're writing this press release to help clarify the reception of Fiducia Supplicans, while recommending at the same time a full and calm reading of the declaration so as to better understand its meaning and purpose. And I highly encourage people, if you haven't read the document yet, just type in Fiducia Supplicans on Google. It'll come right up, and read it for yourself, calmly, with an open mind, with an open heart, a spirit of docility and humility. And you'll gain a great deal of clarity, and you'll also be able to dispel a lot of the fake news that's out there about the document. All right, so concerning doctrine, Section 1, Doctrine, the understandable statements of some Episcopal conferences regarding the document Fiducia Supplicans have the value of highlighting the need for a more extended period of pastoral reflection. So bishops and especially Episcopal conferences, they need to take some more time to reflect on this instead of kind of a knee-jerk reaction. They need to spend a little bit more time reflecting on it. In other words, what is expressed by these Episcopal conferences cannot be interpreted as doctrinal opposition. And we've heard this from so many people. Hey, there's these bishops out there in Episcopal conferences that are rejecting the Pope's doctrine and the magisterium's teachings. And a lot of that is blown out of proportion. And what Fernandez is noting is that these Episcopal conferences, cannot be interpreted as rejecting the church's doctrine and the teaching in Fiducia Supplicans, because the document is clear and definitive about marriage and sexuality. So, in other words, if somebody says, "Hey, I don't agree with the doctrine," well, wait, hold on. You don't agree that marriage is between one man and a woman and one woman, open to life, and that any act outside of that that is sexual is sinful? You don't believe that? There's nothing here doctrinally to contest. Everything in it is orthodox. There are several indisputable phrases in the declaration that leave this in no doubt. So here he's going to substantiate the claim. This declaration remains firm on the traditional doctrine of the church about marriage. This is, again, from the document itself, not allowing any type of liturgical rite or blessing similar to a liturgical rite that can create confusion. So anything that's being done that does create confusion, it's already out of bounds. You cannot have any kind of blessing that would create confusion. That is not permitted by the document. One acts in these situations of couples in irregular situations without officially validating their status or changing in any way the church's perennial teaching on marriage. In other words, whenever a person is blessed, we're not saying that, hey, this person's union with this other individual is somehow being approved of. And that's going to be labored, point that's labored throughout this clarification. But again, here, the document notes itself that their union is not being validated. Therefore, rites and prayers that could create confusion between what constitutes marriage, which is the exclusive, stable, and indissoluble union between a man and a woman, naturally open to the generation of children. There's a reassertion of humanae vitae. And what contradicts it are inadmissible. So any act outside of a marriage between one man, one woman, open to life, any sexual act outside of that context, inadmissible. And even acts that are not open to the generation of children within that marriage are inadmissible. Again, a reassertion of humanae vitae. This conviction is grounded in the perennial Catholic doctrine of marriage. It is only in this context that sexual relations find their natural, proper, and fully human meaning. The church's doctrine on this point remains firm. So anybody who is saying that this compromises with sin or changes the church's view on homosexuality, that is just simply not true. The document is clear. Such is also the meaning of the responsum of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. This is that 2021 decision of the congregation that said that the church cannot bless sin. Well, here it is being reasserted in this new document. It hasn't been changed, hasn't been reversed. It's in fact reemphasized and reasserted. Such is the meaning of the responsum of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which states, the church does not have the power to impart blessings on unions of persons of the same sex. You read that correctly. So anybody out there who has been telling you, hey, this document allows for the blessing of gay unions, wait, no. The document itself actually explicitly rejects that view. So it's simply not true to make that claim. For this reason, since the church has always considered only those sexual relations that are lived out within marriage to be morally licit, The church does not have the power to confer its liturgical blessing when that would somehow offer a form of moral legitimacy to a union that presumes to be a marriage or to an extramarital sexual practice. So, in other words, we cannot in any way bless something that is disordered. You can't bless that. The church can't bless sin, so it cannot bless a sinful union. That is once again reasserted in this document, despite Catholics out there, even Catholics who are saying otherwise. It's explicitly repudiated. Evidently, there is no room to distance ourselves doctrinally from this declaration or to consider it heretical or contrary to the tradition of the church or blasphemous. We've heard some bishops, specifically Bishop Schneider and his own bishop, we've heard them claim that this is contrary to the tradition of the church, that it's blasphemous. We've heard others say it's heretical. Well, wait, if this is heretical, then actually it's the person who makes that accusation that is guilty of heresy, because the church reaffirms the dogmas of Catholicism on marriage. So it's not heretical. All right. So now that that issue is out of the way, we turn to the second section, practical reception. Some bishops, however, express themselves in particular regarding a practical aspect, the possible blessing of couples in irregular situations. The declaration contains a proposal for short and simple pastoral blessings, neither liturgical nor ritualized, of couples in irregular situations, but not of their unions. Okay, so when we talk about, a same-sex couple coming to receive a blessing, this is not a blessing of approval. It's rather a conferring of assisting grace so that they can live a holier life and conform themselves to God's image and likeness and to his commands, which we'll see here from the document again in a moment, because that will be touched on. But it is certainly not to validate their union. That has to be underlined and stressed. Underlying, underlining that these are blessings without a liturgical format, which neither approve nor justify the situation in which these people find themselves. So it is just not a validation of any sinful union that they're in. That's explicitly repudiated. What is this? It's a blessing for persons, not their relationship, not their union. Documents of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, such as Fiducia Supplicans, in their practical aspects, may require more or less time for their application, depending on local contexts and the discernment of each diocesan bishop with his diocese. In some places, no difficulties arise for their immediate application, while in others, it will be necessary not to introduce them, while taking the time necessary for reading and interpretation. Watch this. Some bishops, for example, have established that each priest must carry out the work of discernment and that he may, however, perform these blessings only in private. None of this is problematic if it is expressed with due respect for a text signed and approved by the Supreme Pontiff himself, while attempting in some way to accommodate the reflection contained in it. So, the perspective that, I think that, if I'm going to bless sinners who ask for these blessings, well, I'm going to do that privately. The prefect is saying, look, there's nothing wrong with that. If you feel that that is the best way to avoid scandal and confusion, there's nothing wrong with that. Each local bishop, by virtue of his own ministry, always has the power of discernment in loco. So in his local territory, that is in the concrete place that he knows better than others, precisely because it is his own flock. Prudence and attention to the ecclesial context and to the local culture could allow for different methods of application, but not a total or definitive denial of this path that is proposed to priest. Did you hear that? There's a lot of room here, a lot of wiggle room in applying this to local territories on part of diocesan bishops and ordinaries. There's a lot of wiggle room, but there can't be a total repudiation or a total or definitive denial of this. That's not possible. Now, he does address some delicate situations of some countries, such as some African countries. Watch this. The case of some Episcopal conferences must be understood in their contexts. Now, we've seen a lot of people blow this out of proportion, and they've been saying, oh, there's just so many bishops and so many Episcopal conferences. They're saying this is heresy, and they're rejecting the document and blowing it out of proportion. I've seen some guys out there saying, oh, this Ukrainian bishop rejects Fiducia Supplicans. And it's like, no, he didn't reject it. He's just saying it's not applicable to his diocese. And that's what's going to be addressed here, that important and vital distinction. There can't be an outright rejection, but there could be some circumstances where this may not be applicable to a particular territory in light of some circumstances that really do need to be considered. And for instance, African bishops are brought up here. Some of the African bishops have said, hey, hold on, wait. There's some laws in our country that this conflicts with. So I don't think we can apply this in our territory. You know, they're not outright rejecting the document or the doctrine within it, but they're saying, look, this doesn't work with the laws that we have in our country. Well, watch what he says in response to them. The cases of some Episcopal conferences must be understood in their contexts. In several countries, there are strong cultural and even legal issues that require time and pastoral strategies that go beyond the short term. If there are laws that condemn the mere act of declaring oneself a homosexual with prison and in some cases with torture and even death, it goes without saying that a blessing would be imprudent. Right there, he's validating some of the African bishops who are saying, wait, this doesn't work with the laws in our country. If we give them a blessing, that could open them up to criminal charges. So, the prefect is saying, look, that's totally understandable. In that situation, it may be imprudent to administer these blessings. So it can't be an outright rejection of the document and the doctrine behind it or the concept. But if it is in violation of some of these practical considerations, then yeah, it might be imprudent. So a diocesan bishop will need to determine for himself in his territory on whether or not this really can be applied. It is clear that the bishops do not wish to expose homosexual persons to violence. It remains vital that these Episcopal conferences do not support a doctrine different from that of the declaration signed by the Pope. So it's one thing to say, hey, this may not apply to my territory. Oh, okay, we can have that discussion. That very well could be the case that it doesn't apply to a bishop's diocesan territory. That could be the case. But that's a far cry from saying, oh, I think this is heresy and I reject its doctrine. Those are two different discussions. And you can't say that you reject the doctrine. And he says, given that it is perennial doctrine. So you can't say you disagree with the doctrine because the doctrine in the text is the perennial doctrine of the church. But rather that they recommend the need for study and discernment so as to act with pastoral prudence in such a context. In truth, there are not a few countries that, to varying degrees, condemn, prohibit, and criminalize homosexuality. In these cases, apart from the question of blessings, there exists a great and wide-ranging pastoral responsibility that includes training, the defense of human dignity, the teaching of the social doctrine of the church, and various strategies that do not admit of a rushed response. So, some of these bishops, they may want to take a little bit more time, in other words, to digest this instead of kind of a knee jerk reaction. Um, and I think that's helpful advice that he's offering them. The real novelty of the document. I love this section. Okay. Some people have been very concerned about the earlier part of the document that refers to innovation and things that are new. And as soon as people hear those words, innovation and new, they panic, they freak out because they think, wait, if you have something new in theology, isn't that abandoning the deposit of faith? No, no, this is the way development of doctrine works. There's always an aspect that is the same, that is in continuity, the substance of the faith. And then there's always something that is new, perhaps the way in which we express it linguistically, or how we apply it to new situations. This is the way doctrinal development works. There's this dynamic of those things that are new and those things that are not new. What can't be new is adding to the deposit of faith or subtracting from it. You can't do that. The church has no authority to do that. And it hasn't attempted to do that. But maybe taking the church's faith and applying it to new questions and new situations, that's possible. So watch this when he discusses what the real novelty of the document is. Watch the real novelty of this declaration, the one that requires a generous effort of reception and from which no one should declare themselves excluded. So nobody can say, hey, I'm excluded from this, is not the possibility of blessing couples in irregular situations, despite what most people will tell you. Most people will say, well, what's new here is that you can bless couples in irregular situations without blessing their union. In other words, blessing the persons of the couple, but not the union itself. Some say, well, that's what's new. Well, watch this. He says, actually, that's not the new thing here. What is new is it is the invitation to distinguish between two different forms of blessings. That's where there is something new here, to make a proper distinction between liturgical or ritualized blessings and spontaneous or pastoral blessings. Now, he's not saying that this has never happened before and we've never had this distinction. What he's saying is, what is new is that we need to make this distinction. This distinction has always been there, but we haven't really made that distinction clear and made it known. The presentation clearly explains that the value of this document is that it offers a specific and innovative contribution to the pastoral meaning of blessings, permitting a broadening and enrichment of the classical understanding of blessings, which is closely linked to a liturgical perspective. This theological reflection, based on the pastoral vision of Pope Francis, implies a real development from what has been said about blessings in the magisterium and the official text of the church. And notice it's a development of doctrine, not a corruption, not an evolution, not a contradiction, a development. Something that we as Catholics should be able to appreciate since we have about 2,000 years of development now. In the background is found the positive evaluation of popular pastoral care, which appears in many of the Holy Father's texts. In this context, the Holy Father invites us to value the simple faith of the people of God, who even in the midst of their sins, emerge from their everyday lives and open their hearts to ask for God's help. I love that because, gosh, that speaks to me personally. I hope it does you as well. I have sinned and I need the church to help me. Now, the church can help me overcome sin with the sacramental grace that it offers me. It can and does. And of course, people need to avail themselves of that. But in the same way that we also ask for blessings in addition to sacramental grace, this is what's being pointed out. Yes, we have sacramental grace and we have confession and the Eucharist to help us. We also have these other blessings to give us additional grace. He says, for this reason, rather than the blessing of couples in irregular unions, the text of the dicastery has adopted the other profile of a declaration, which is much more than a responsum or a letter. The central theme, which invites us especially to a deeper pastoral practice, which enriches our pastoral praxis, is to have a broader understanding of blessings and of the proposal that these pastoral blessings, which do not require the same condition as blessings in a liturgical or ritual context, flourish. Now, that's important because what are some of the conditions for liturgical blessings? Well, repentance, um, that the union itself is not disordered. Consequently, leaving polemics aside, the text requires an effort to reflect serenely with the heart of shepherds, free from all ideology. Although some bishops consider it prudent not to impart these blessings for the moment, we all need to grow equally in the conviction that non ritualized blessings are not a consecration of the person. Full stop. These blessings, this isn't saying you're now somehow consecrated for something, or you're somehow validated, or you're doing the right thing. Nor is it a consecration of the couple who receives them. You heard that? The union itself, the relationship that they have, it's not a validation of this couple. They are not a justification of all their actions. This couple could be doing things to each other that is sinful and harmful to each other. And so these blessings it's not a validation of that, and it's not a justification for their acts. And they are not an endorsement of the life that they lead. So if they're living in sin, this is not an endorsement of their sin. When the Pope asked us to grow in a broader understanding of pastoral blessings, he proposed that we think of a way of blessing that does not require the placing of so many conditions to carry out this simple gesture of pastoral closeness, which is a means of promoting openness to God in the midst of the most diverse circumstances. So, in other words, the conditions for this kind of blessing are not the same as maybe like the conditions for the sacrament of confession. With the sacrament of confession, you have to have a firm purpose of amendment. And if the confessor realizes that the person doesn't have a firm purpose of amendment, he will not give them absolution. He will not forgive them of their sins. Christ will not forgive them. And so the priest will not offer absolution. However, the priest will then give that person a simple blessing, even though they are not fully penitent. You might have cases where a person is not ready to fully repent of their sin. So they're not fully ready for confession yet, because they're not ready to do that just yet. But they're also not fully given over to the sin, and they are open to making a change. There is that middle position that some people find themselves in. So they're not ready for confession, and they're not ready for the Eucharist. But they might be ready for simple blessings that do give them actual grace that may help bring about repentance. Think of St. Augustine, who prayed that prayer at one point in his life. Lord, it was something to the lines of, Lord, heal me, but not yet. In other words, Lord, help me to overcome my lust and my desire for fornication, but not yet. Help me overcome that, but I'm not ready yet. It's this expression of, I want to change, but I'm not fully ready to turn away from my sin. Some people find themselves in that situation. So yes, they're not ready for confession. They haven't met that standard yet. But they might be ready to receive some simple blessings that can confer actual grace. And we can't put the same conditions for these simple blessings that we put on somebody who goes to confession. That's the point. And thank God for that, because there's a real pastoral need to help people here. Because again, there are plenty of people out there who feel like, okay, I'm not ready to give up my life of sin, but I'm also embarrassed by it. I'm ashamed by it. I don't think it's right. I'm not asking you to validate my sin. I know it's wrong. I'm not ready to give my sin up just yet, but I'm open to it. That describes a lot of people. Um, whether you realize it or not, that describes a ton of people. And so these blessings are there to help them, not to validate what they're doing, but there to help them move them forward so that they can come to that point of, I'm ready to repent. I'm ready to turn away from this. I'm ready with a full purpose of amendment to turn away. That actual grace that they're receiving from these blessings could really change lives. So it really meets a pastoral need. And I think that so many people are being insensitive to that. And they just dismiss them. Well, they could just go to confession. I'm sorry. Stop being so dismissive of people who are struggling with sin. Yes, they need to go to confession, but you know what? Some people are not ready to turn away fully, but they're also not fully given over to the sin, and they're not trying to validate it. They're in that middle position. So I love the fact that this is meeting that need. Now, section 5, how do these pastoral blessings present themselves in concrete terms? All right, so let's get specific here. Let's give examples. He's going to give us examples. I love this. To be clearly distinguished from liturgical or ritualized blessings, pastoral blessings must above all be very short. These are blessings lasting a few seconds. So these are not long, drawn out, prescribed, because again, for those, this would need to be, something that, is actually in accord with God's will as far as the union. A simple blessing, however, something lasting a few seconds here and spontaneous, that does not validate the union, that's something else. These are blessings lasting a few seconds without an approved ritual and without a book of blessing. If two people approach together to seek the blessing, notice that, two people. So you have a couple who is living in sin. If two people approach together to seek the blessing, one simply asks the Lord for peace, health, and other good things for these two people who request it. So, in other words, there's nothing wrong with asking that God give them peace, health, and other good things. That's not validating their sin. At the same time, one asks that they may live the gospel of Christ in full fidelity, and so that the Holy Spirit can free these two people from everything that does not correspond to his divine will and from everything that requires purification. So God can help them turn away from their sin. So in other words, yeah, we're asking them to receive peace, health, good things, but also that they would be freed from their sins. I love that he adds that in here. And he's going to even give an example of this blessing. This non-ritualized form of blessing, with the simplicity and brevity of its form, does not intend to justify anything that is not morally acceptable. It is not a blessing of their sin, period. Obviously, it is not a marriage, but equally, it is not an approval or ratification of anything either. It is solely the response of a pastor towards two persons who ask for God's help. The object of the blessing is persons, not the union. So when it speaks of blessings for same-sex couples, it's for the persons of the couple, not for the union of the couple. A point that I've belabored here on the show. And here he's once again validating that. It's for persons. The object is persons, not their relationship. I don't know how we can get any more clear than this. If that part is no longer clear, I don't think you can be helped. I don't think at that point, I think the issue is not one of I'm unable to understand this intellectually. I think the problem is there might be an issue in the will. You might not want to understand it. Therefore, in this case, the pastor does not impose conditions and does not inquire about the intimate lives of these people. So, a blessing to be freed from sin He's not requiring moral perfection from them because the whole point of the blessing is to help free them from sin. Since some have raised the question of what these blessings might look like, let us look at a concrete example. I love this. Okay, let's get concrete here. People have wanted, okay, well, can the Vatican give us like an actual example of this? Well, here you go. Let us imagine that among a large number making a pilgrimage, a couple of divorced people, now in a new union, says to the priest or say to the priest, please give us a blessing. We cannot find work. He is very ill. We do not have a home, and life is becoming very difficult. May God help us. How could you not pray God's blessing to help people? Not validating their sin, but gosh, that's totally understandable. Watch this. In this case, the priest can recite a simple prayer like this. He gives you an example. Lord, look at these children of yours. Grant them health, work, peace, and mutual help. Free them from everything that contradicts your gospel and allow them to live according to your will. Amen. I love it. How balanced is that? Yes, Lord, please grant these people help, health, work, peace, but also free them from their sins. I love that. Again, some of these people are not ready to make a firm purpose of amendment. They're not there yet, but they're also not there to flaunt their sin. They don't want a validation of their sin, and they do want to be freed from their sin. And this meets a real pastoral need to help loose them from the bonds of Satan and break ties with sin and free them from everything that contradicts the gospel. So it says, then it concludes with the sign of the cross on each of the two persons. We're talking about something that lasts about 10 or 15 seconds. Does it make sense to deny these kinds of blessings to two people who ask for them? Is it not more appropriate to support their faith, whether it be small or great, to assist them in their weaknesses with a divine blessing and to channel that openness to transcendence, which could lead them to be more faithful to the gospel? In order to avoid any doubt, the declaration adds that when the blessing is requested by a couple in an irregular situation, even though it is expressed outside the rites prescribed by the liturgical books, this blessing should never be imparted in concurrence with the ceremonies of a civil union and not even in connection with them. Why? Because it might give the appearance of somehow blessing the union. That's why. And you can't do that. You have to avoid that, period. If there is scandal, if this will cause confusion, you don't do it. Nor can it be performed with any clothing, gestures, maybe like hand holding, right? Or words that are proper to a wedding. Listen to that. And clothing. And that also goes for the minister. He shouldn't be wearing a stole. That makes it liturgical in nature, and that's already a violation of the document. The same applies when the blessing is requested by a same-sex couple. It remains clear, therefore, that the blessing must not take place in a prominent place within a sacred building or in front of an altar. I've seen some pictures of a priest with a pride flag stole on in front of the altar. No, the document says you cannot do that. Nor can there be this other stuff of, hand holding and things like that, because then I think that one is now causing confusion. There could be a misinterpretation now. Some might now perceive this as, even though it's not necessarily something public, others might see it. They might misunderstand and think that the union is being blessed with such gestures. Therefore, all of those things must be gone. Can't have that, because that would create confusion and scandal, and the document says you can't have that. And he says, as this would also create confusion. Again, the document emphasizes over and over and over, at all costs, you have to avoid confusion and scandal. For this reason, every bishop in his diocese is authorized by the declaration Fiducia Supplicans to make this type of simple blessing available, bearing in mind the need for prudence and care. But in no way is he authorized to propose or make blessings available that may resemble a liturgical rite. Last section, catechesis. In some places, perhaps, some catechesis will be necessary that can help everyone to understand that these types of blessings are not an endorsement of the life led by those who request them. How many times does he have to say it? It's not a blessing of the union. It's not a blessing of the sin. It's not an endorsement of the life. Anything that would cause that impression has to be avoided, cannot be done. I don't know how much more clear we can get. Anybody who's of goodwill at this point, I think, realizes, okay, it is not a blessing of sin. Nobody in good conscience can still argue that. Even less are they an absolution, as the gestures are far from being a sacrament or a rite. They are simple expressions of pastoral closeness that do not impose the same requirements as a sacrament or formal rite. I mean, think about this. We know this from our own experience. You know, you go up and you ask a priest for a blessing. Are you always in a state of grace when you do that, by the way? Have you ever asked a priest for a blessing when you were not in a state of grace? If the answer is yes, then now you understand. Okay. Did you require yourself to be in a state of grace? The same requirements that you might expect of yourself to receive the Eucharist, did you require yourself to meet that standard to receive that blessing? No. Right. You can't require people to meet that standard for these simple blessings, because the whole purpose of the blessing is to help free them from the bonds of sin. We will all have to become accustomed to accepting the fact that if a priest gives this type of simple blessings, he is not a heretic. He is not ratifying anything, nor is he denying Catholic doctrine. So, in other words, this is going to have to be something everyone accepts, even if you can't apply this in some territories due to other circumstances. Okay, but all of us have to be on the same page that when a priest does this, I mean, obviously, when it's being done properly, not being done in a way that it abuses the document or neglects its guidelines. When a priest does this simple blessing properly, he's not a heretic. He's not ratifying anything, nor is he denying Catholic doctrine. This is going to have to be something that we all accept. It's not going to be a negotiable. We can help God's people to discover that these kinds of blessings are just simple pastoral channels to help people give expression to their faith, even if they are great sinners. For this reason, in giving a blessing to two people who come together to ask for it spontaneously, we are not consecrating them, nor are we congratulating them, nor indeed are we approving of that type of union. I mean, this is like the 8th time he's said it. In reality, the same happens when individuals are blessed. So when one person asks for a blessing, the exact same thing happens here. When an individual comes and says, "Hey, Father, please bless me." In reality, the same happens when individuals are blessed, as the individual will ask for a blessing, not absolution, could be a great sinner. Again, something that we probably know from our own experience. But this does not mean we deny him this paternal gesture in the midst of his struggle to survive. If this is clarified as a result of good catechesis, we can free ourselves from the fear that these blessings of ours may express something inadequate. We can be freer and perhaps closer and more fruitful ministers with a ministry that is full of gestures of fatherhood and hospitality without fear of being misunderstood. This really does meet a need, and I really hope we'll go the extra mile to reach sinners who are struggling, especially with disordered unions. The church with this document says we are going to go as far as possible to reach sinners with the good news and to free them from sin in a way that cannot and does not compromise the faith or the morals of the church. How far can we go to reach in there to the sinner and bring them out of the depths of sin? How far can we go without compromising the faith? It's a pastoral gesture. This is the work of an evangelist who will go the extra mile to save a soul. Obviously not in a way that compromises the faith. That's a non-negotiable. That can never be done. But how far can we go to reach sinners to bring them to God's grace? I think that's a good thing. That shows a pastor's heart of trying to reach people who are in need. And I do think that this will help people who are in need. Now, obviously, some people will abuse it, but they've been abusing the words of our Lord too. So you didn't need a document for them to do that. People who abuse things, they do that with or without the documents. Abuse does not negate proper use, though. He says, we ask the newly born Lord to shower a generous and gracious blessing upon everyone so that we can live a holy and happy 2024. Cardinal Fernandez, the prefect. Wow. Very, very, very helpful. Love it. Now, after having looked at this, I want to just briefly look at Cardinal Fernandez's interview yesterday, where he goes over the German bishops. So he takes the German bishops head on. And I love it because he puts them in their place. And it needed to be said. Cardinal Fernandez, Vatican same-sex blessings guidance is clear answer to German bishops. Fiducia Supplicans is written as a refutation to the German bishops because the German bishops went too far. And Fiducia Supplicans says, no. Look, you can't do all this. You can't bless sin. You can't bless the union. You can't have liturgies. You can't have rituals for all this. None of that. All of those things the Germans are trying to do. Fiducia Supplicans says, no, you can't do that. Here's how far you can go to reach a sinner without compromising the faith. It's a refutation of the German bishops. Amid significant confusion about the Vatican's recent guidance on same-sex blessings, the document's architect has lashed out at those advancing the most liberal interpretation, Catholic leadership in Germany. Now, mind you, not all German bishops are on board with the shenanigans from some of these German bishops. There are some good German bishops out there who are not on board with this stuff. When we speak here of German bishops, we're talking about those who are on board with compromising the faith. Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Vatican Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith and longtime theological advisor to Pope Francis, described Fiducia Supplicans as a clear answer to German plans to formalize liturgical blessings for same-sex couples, a move that is explicitly forbidden by the December 18 guidance. He says, it is not the answer that people in 2 or 3 countries would like to have. Right? Think of Flemish bishops here too, right? Fernandez said of Fiducia Supplicans in January 3rd interview with the German Catholic newspaper Die Tagespost. Don't know how to pronounce that. Rather, it is a pastoral response that everyone could accept, albeit with difficulty. I love what Father Mark Goring said the other day. It's kind of a sentiment I've tried to express, but he expressed it better than I. And he noted how what this document does is it will help facilitate union with the church so that we don't have a schism with Germany. It will help rein them in. Here's what we can do and here's what we can't do, German bishops. It'll help rein them in without causing a schism. I sure hope that that's the case. I hope people on the other end of the spectrum don't end up causing a schism. A few of them have already begun that, starting schismatic seminaries and stuff like that. But for the most part, I hope it doesn't turn into something massive. The Vatican's guidance proposes the possibility of spontaneous blessings for same-sex couples and those in irregular relations, but without officially validating their status or changing in any way the Church's perennial teaching on marriage. To avoid confusion, Fiducia Supplicans prohibits the promotion of formalized blessings and the use of any clothing or symbol that could give the impression of a marital blessing. That again also applies to the priests. No stoles. Members of the controversial German Synodal Way, a collaboration between the German Bishops' Conference and a powerful lay lobby, overwhelmingly approved developing formalized ritual text for same-sex blessings at a March 2023 assembly in Frankfurt. Not only do they vote for formalized ritual texts, but also for the blessing of the union, not the persons, the union. And also they want to argue that Homosexuality is not a sin. So all of that is repudiated by Fiducia Supplicans. It's a refutation of the German bishops. It is a sin, according to Fiducia Supplicans. The union cannot be blessed, and there cannot be anything liturgical. Literally everything the Germans were pushing for, they did not get. Since then, several German bishops have green-lighted public blessings of same-sex couples in their dioceses. And following the publication of Fiducia Supplicans, ZDK Vice President Birgit Mock said the church in Germany would not scrap its plans to develop a formal text of same-sex blessings despite the guidance's prohibitions. So you know what? Some of them in Germany are just saying, you know what? We don't care what Fiducia Supplicans says. We're still going to be in disobedience. Well, Fernandez is going to be meeting with them, and I'm eager to see how that one's going to work out. Fernandez suggested that some German Catholics may fail to appreciate the perspectives of Catholics in other parts of the world on questions related to sexuality. Listening to some reflections made in the context of the German synodal path, it sometimes seems that a part of the world feels particularly enlightened to understand what the other poor wretches are unable to grasp because they are closed or medieval. And then this enlightened part naively believes that, thanks to it, the whole universal church is reformed and freed from the old schemes, Fernandez told Die Tagespost. I love how he's just making fun of the German bishops here. He said, the German bishops, they think that they're just so enlightened. And we're, those of us who don't say that homosexuality is now okay and you can have gay marriage and all that, we're all just, closed-minded medieval peasants. And he's basically saying these German bishops are fools. To think that they're so enlightened and the rest of us are just so stupid because we hold to the faith of the church. Now, how does this jive with all of those Catholics out there, especially Catholic YouTubers, who think that, the Pope and Fernandez are on board with the gay agenda and they're on board with the German bishops and they're supporting the German bishops? You literally have Fernandez explicitly calling out the German bishops and then making fun of them, mocking them publicly. I find that interesting. Similarly, the DDF head suggested that some German Catholic leaders don't appreciate Pope Francis's effort to maintain church unity. Again, a point that I think Father Mark Goring made. I think that's a point to consider. Some German bishops do not seem to understand that a liberal or enlightened pope could not guarantee this communion among Germans, Africans, Asians, Latin Americans, Russians, and so on. In other words, German bishops, they want a liberal pope. They want a pope who is enlightened and understands that, hey, homosexuality is not a sin. And yeah, we need to get on board with blessing gay unions and stuff like that. That's what some German bishops want. And they want a pope who's on board with that. And Pope Francis has completely rejected that. And what they don't understand is, so you want a pope to be like that. You really think the church is going to remain united? You think that the African, Asians, Latin Americans, or Russians, they're all going to continue to remain in communion with that kind of pope? It's going to cause a massive problem. I don't think that we would ever get this, but what he's saying is, look, take your silly hypothetical scenario where a pope does this. It's going to destroy the church. A valid point. A pastoral pope, on the other hand, is able to do this. And again, just to reiterate, I don't think that the church could be destroyed or that this scenario could happen. And I don't think that he thinks it could happen. He's just taking the Germans on their own basis and he's saying, okay, you think this can happen? You argue this? Well, it's just going to lead to the destruction of the church. A pastoral pope, on the other hand, is able to do this. So not a liberal pope, not a pope who compromises on the faith, but a pastoral pope, on the other hand, is able to keep church unity because he preserves the church teaching while allowing it to enter into dialogue with the concrete, often so wounded lives of the faithful. Again, we can't compromise on the faith, but there are some people out there, they're not ready for a firm purpose of amendment, but they are also not not trying to justify their sin. They know it's wrong, and they do want to be freed from it. They're in that middle position that St. Augustine expressed in his Confessions. That's a ton of people. And yeah, we can't compromise on the faith. We can't bless your union, but we can go that extra mile to offer you some actual grace through a simple blessing, not a validation, but a simple blessing to offer you grace to be freed from your sins. The blessing will not immediately free them from their sins. Sacramental confession will. However, these actual blessings may help prepare them so that they now can be disposed to go to confession and be fully repentant and now be freed from their bonds of sin, from the bonds of sin. A pastoral pope can accomplish this um, while striving to maintain church unity. Fernandez also directly challenged the synodal way's basis for trying to radically change church teaching and practice related to sexuality and governance, namely the need to address the systematic causes of the sexual abuse crisis. You know, some of the German bishops are saying, oh, well, the sex abuse crisis. So we need to now validate same-sex unions. That's the solution. To believe that in one part of the world, the crisis caused by sexual abuse can be solved by decisions that are contrary to the teaching of the universal church is, in my opinion, not even reasonably justified, Fernandez said. I love it. Basically, okay, so Germans, your solution to the sex abuse crisis is to validate sexually disordered acts. Help me make that make sense. Wait, hold on. You want to somehow get over the sex abuse crisis by validating disordered sexual and sinful acts. Huh? I love how tactful he is. He's a lot nicer than I would be to them. Fernandez said, noting that some non-Catholic Christian communities with differing understandings of sexuality and authority are also plagued by problems related to sex abuse. Wow. He went there. He went there. Um wow, I don't know what to say about that one. So he's saying, okay, there are some non-Catholic Christian communities out there. Think some Anglican communions. Not all Anglicans are the same, by the way, but think of some Anglican communions. Some of these non-Christian communities, they have differing understandings of sexuality. In other words, that think that homosexuality is okay, are also plagued by problems related to sex abuse. They have sex abuse problems. In other words, simply recognizing somehow that homosexuality is no longer a sin doesn't free you from sex abuse problems, because you have other communions out there that do recognize homosexuality is not a sin, and yet they have sex abuse problems. He went there. The publication of Fiducia Supplicans. And by the way, I don't think he's just thinking of some Anglicans here. I mean, he also could be referring to some Lutherans, some other Protestants, some non-denoms, you know. The publication of Fiducia Supplicans has been marked by widespread confusion and conflicting interpretations, with bishops and countries throughout Africa and Eastern Europe banning the proposed blessings in their jurisdictions, while prelates in countries like Germany have characterized the document as an affirmation of their push for change, which, again, they can't do, honestly. Wednesday's interview was not the first time Fernandez had addressed the impact of Fiducia Supplicans. In a December 23 interview, he told the Pillar that some episcopates' advancement of ritualized blessings of irregular couples is inadmissible, and that they should reformulate the proposal in that regard. The Argentinian also said that he is planning a trip to Germany to have some conversations that I believe are important. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we've kind of needed that for a while. He's getting things done. He's only been in office since July, and he's really been getting things done. Yes, please go to Germany, and please put them in their place. And again, they will be brought back to Rome, looks like 3 times this year, to be reminded by multiple dicastery heads on what they can and can't do, what they can and can't teach. In the interview, the cardinal also discussed the Vatican's ongoing dialogue with the German Bishops' Conference representatives. Two have occurred already, with the next set to take place in Rome this month. This month. So stay tuned for that. Fernandez reaffirmed the discussion of changes to church teaching on sexuality and male-only holy orders will not be on the table in further meetings. So, the German bishops who are wanting the church to approve of homosexuality and have women's ordination, nope. Pope Francis said, you can't do that. Not on the table. Something already expressed by the German bishops in an October letter from Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin. However, the DDF had suggested that the door remains open to discuss how reformable aspects of the issues involved can be deepened and possibly lead to a pastoral development, similar to Fiducia Supplicans. So, what are things that we can develop? We can have that discussion. That's legit. But the things that we can't discuss pertain to the deposit of faith. You can't change that. The cardinal also addressed the German bishop, the German church leadership's ongoing preparations to establish a governing synodal council of bishops and laity, which was forbidden by senior Vatican leadership in a January 2023 letter explicitly approved by Pope Francis. The Synodal Committee, laying the groundwork for the Synodal Council, held its first meeting in November 10, though it was boycotted by four German ordinaries, while an additional four were not able to attend. The German Bishops' Conference is set to vote on adopting the committee's statutes at its February plenary session. The condition of continuing dialogue between the Vatican and the DBK, he said, is that we do not continue to make decisions that will only be discussed at further meetings. I thought that was funny. We must remember that time is worth more than space, he said. Pope Francis's 2023 apostolic exhortation notes that, which Fernandez is believed to have ghostwritten. So let's stay calm and think about the bigger picture, he says. Good. I hope he gets them in order, because they're all over the place, and they do need to be reined in. We need more of that. Rein in some of those who are promoting same-sex unions, trying to validate the unions, trying to validate sin, compromising on the faith, stuff like that. Hey, I hope this was helpful to y'all. Please let me know if it was in the comment section. I'd like to get your feedback. If you found this helpful, please let me know. If you're one of those people who you didn't know, you're on the fence, prior to this stream, but after this, you feel like, hey, this makes sense. I get what the church is saying. I found this clarifying. Thank you for this. Let me know that in the comment section. Please put that there. And, also let me know, do you think that the critics will receive this, that this will clarify things for the critics, or will this not be good enough for the critics? Will anything ever be good enough for the critics? I'd like to know your thoughts. Put that in the comment section. If you agree with me, disagree, doesn't matter, put that in there. As long as you're respectful, we can have that conversation. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. Just be respectful. Don't make false accusations. Don't slander. Don't lie. Be respectful, express your differences in a respectful way, and we won't have an issue. And I'd love to hear from you if you disagree. So put that in the comment section. And as I've said earlier at the beginning of the stream, please hit that subscribe button. Help me grow Reason and Theology. The more you hit subscribe, the more people I can reach, because YouTube will send this out to newer people. And so if you found this video specifically to be helpful and you want to see other people benefit from it, hit the subscribe button. Like the video, comment, share it on your social media. That goes a long way. Please help me reach more people by doing that. Also, if you want to support Reason and Theology financially, patreon.com/Reason and Theology is a great place to do it. There's a link to it in the show notes. And you'll also get access to extra content. So definitely check that out. And I will, in fact, start doing some hopefully I'll start doing some live content related to the magisterium, specifically for patrons only. So if you want to learn more about the Catholic magisterium, stay tuned for more. I have some exciting news for patrons specifically. So I'll be making an announcement to patrons pretty soon. So again, stay tuned on that. Patreon.com/Reason and Theology, or the GoFundMe or PayPal link there in the show notes if you would prefer to support me through that. All right, y'all. We'll see you later. God bless.
Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. It engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today.
Oh, one other thing, y'all. Sneaking this in here instead of doing a separate stream. Sorry. Somebody reminded me in the chat about the super chats. I apologize. Let me just grab them right now instead of in a later stream. Thank you, Truth Brigade, for gifting those memberships. Thank you also, Thomas, for doing that. Cactoid Jim with FS Satan is sifting Catholic media producers like we ought to fast and pray for our brothers and sisters. I've noticed that in some ways, not jurisdictionally, not with authority from Christ, but in some ways, I think some content creators have more impact on your average person than your average bishop. They seem to have more influence on the average person in that regard with the way social media works. So I do think that it makes sense that Satan would especially attack content creators because of the potential impact that they can have on people. So I think you're right. And thank you for gifting those memberships. Thank you, Sean Matthew, for doing the same. Truth Brigade, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, keeping your audience constantly armed with truth and facts. I appreciate that. And also thank you for this one. They should retitle this document Crumbs from the Master's Table. That's funny. And thank you, Mahoville, for gifting those memberships. Okay, I just wanted to grab those instead of just maybe doing it in a separate stream, kind of like I did the last time. So I had to sneak that in, caught it at the last second. God bless y'all. We'll see you later.
Hey everybody, just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com.